Whoops. User error. Oh my god. Hello, it's DeeCee and Kat.
Hello.
We're going to have limited technical difficulties today. I just know it, except
Fair
that
enough.
wasn't a good sign.
If that's all it is.
Yeah, no biggie. I mean, we're learning. Welcome, everybody. We're so excited for you to join us. I'm DeeCee. I'm an MLM dropout. I left Young Living in April of this year, and we've been reading through the transcripts of the Young Living versus doTERRA. I talk more than Young Living on my channel, but this has been a fun thing to read through with Kat. And if Kat is new to you, I'm going to let her introduce herself. She's incredible, and yeah, I'm going to hand the mic over to her.
My name is Kat. I'm a licensed registered dietitian nutritionist, and I make mostly YouTube videos, trying to do more on Instagram, but Instagram's not my favorite app. It's hard for me to get on there, but I focus in on nutrition-related MLMs, supplements, the diet programs on there, and other fear-mongering nutrition claims that aren't really evidence-based. So that's what I do.
Awesome.
And as far as my relationship with Young Living, so I was part of another nutrition-related MLM, but as I was trying to help support one of my friends who was in Young Living, I purchased a kit, and a year later, I found out that she actually signed me up to be a distributor. So other than that was my involvement in Young Living.
And while we are reading through a transcript, we are not legal professionals. We're not giving legal advice. Our opinions are our own. Mine don't reflect Kat's. Kat's don't reflect mine, and they do not take any of this as anything factual or legal other than what is written down and what actually came from the case that a judge decided. And if we get something wrong, it's because we're not legal professionals. We're just here to entertain, to comment, to help inform the public about maybe something that they weren't aware of. Some interesting things that have come up so far in the case is Gary Young allegedly was moonlighting as a doctor as part of a surgical team in Ecuador, and lots of other shocking things. Maybe that they don't have enough farms to actually supply a majority of the oils that the distributors are claiming are all seed to seal. So it's been a whole shocking back and forth with the defendants and the plaintiff. In this case, Young Living's a plaintiff. There's two groups of defendants who either are distributors or work in corporate at doTERRA. And hello,
so
live chat.
Have issues.
Yes, both have issues. Jessica, hello. Christina, Tanya, Fizzlesticks, Elizabeth. We have 30 minutes left in your shift, still catching up on stuff. Sky, we're happy to have you. Replay crew, I'm going to be time stamping in the description after the video is over. And we are going to have slides to help you find parts that you want to easier as well, but it'll be hyperlinked in the description after the live stream ends. And today we are doing the Recross examination of Gary Young by Mr. Smith.
Yes, what we were planning on doing last week.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
last time. Mhm.
Yep, Recross, and then we might even get into Rob James, which is the next witness, because the Recross isn't super long. So I'm gonna go ahead and do our little
And
fun.
that's on the same PDF then before the direct examination by
Yes.
Justin
Yep.
Harrison. Okay, perfect.
Yep. Let's see. Recross by Mr. Smith. All right, let's buckle up. All right. And I say buckle up, but is my screen shared yet? It is not. Okay, live chat. What has been the most shocking thing that you've heard in this reading so far? Like mine was Gary Young pretending to be a doctor. I've heard him do that, but I didn't realize one that he was performing surgeries.
Mhm.
I don't know. What about you? What do you think, Kat? What's been the most shocking thing you've heard so far?
The thing that I've heard so far that has been not surprising, but just frustrating is how when Gary was asked about religious overtones, and he said that he did not use those, but at the same time was telling people that they were basically acting because of Satan. It just that it's an absolute lie how he responded to that.
Yep.
And this is not just an interviewer random, it's a court case.
Yeah. It is the actual word for word transcription from what went on in the trial. Let's see, share screen. Share screen. Okay, window. And let me just do the pop out real quick.
That one, and
Perfect.
then the information about the oils helping with
Oh,
was it who was talking about that? Just homosexuality in
yep.
general.
Yep, his
But
wife was, and that they
curing
were
it.
handing out literature at a convention,
Mhm.
allegedly that some of the oils would cure homosexuality, which we do not play that here. We are inclusive and supportive, and that is just wild that they would even say something like that. I don't
What is there to cure?
exactly. Okay. Add to stream. Okay. Down here at the bottom is the recross examination. Mr. Smith is the defendant's attorney, and we have little tabs set up on the side so you can kind of keep track of who's talking, and we switch through them as we go. Yes, it is. This did start early, but we should be. It's 5:30 now, so we're getting right into the reading. I think that worked. Okay, let's see. Alrighty. So this is still Gary Young. Do you want me to be Gary again, and do you want to be Mr. Smith?
Sure.
Okay. I feel slimy being Gary Young, but
You're
it's like
great.
I'm a good
Gary Young. Okay.
All right. So, good morning.
Good morning.
Let me see if I can work a little bit backwards. Just a moment ago, marked as exhibit number 11 was a letter you sent to David Sterling on September 7th of 2007. Are you familiar with that letter?
Correct.
Can I have it displayed, please? I'm a little confused. Are you now saying you terminated David Sterling on September? This letter is dated September 5th. Did you terminate him at your meeting on August 8th? Which of the two?
I never terminated him on August 8th.
On this letter, sir, you say that he's terminated because he would not sign a new agreement. Do you see that right there in the first paragraph? Let me read it to you. Quote, because you have not signed and returned the proposed special projects agreement I sent you, I presume you are no longer interested in remaining with Young Living Essential Oils, end quote. Do you see that?
Okay, I'm gonna take a pause real quick. There's a vote for me to do all of Gary Young's voices in the baby snark voice, so I'm gonna go ahead and try that for a little bit. It's just
Okay,
gonna
I
make
love
it a little
that.
more fun, and I'm just gonna do that. Okay, so I'm gonna start at line 23. Okay.
I love
Correct.
that. What you did is you fired him. You said, if you will sign an agreement that reduces your severance pay down to 6 months, I'll let you stay. Isn't that what you said?
I don't recall saying that.
Isn't it? Isn't that what you did, sir? That's what the letter says. If you don't reduce your severance pay down, you're fired. Isn't that what it really means?
I don't see that.
Well, let's go to Exhibit 10. The other one your attorney just showed a moment ago. You said you wrote Exhibit 10, please. This was dated 8 days after that meeting where Mr. Sterling contends you fired him. Do you remember that meeting?
Yes.
And then 8 days later, you wrote this letter, right? You just said that a moment ago, right?
Yes.
And on the next page of page 2 of that agreement, paragraph 5, can you read that to the jury, what you told Mr. Sterling and the special projects you would give him?
Sorry. If you choose to resign your employment while on special project status, you will be eligible to receive your regular salary and benefits for 6 months following your resignation as provided by paragraph 6D2 of your current employment agreement. I don't know if I can do this the whole time. It's way better, though. It's way better having Gary be Baby Snark.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Now, tell the jury what the difference between the 6 months you just offered him and what his employment agreement provided.
Okay. Mr. Toth. Mr. Toth, objection, foundation, and then me, Gary Young. Oh, God.
I don't understand.
The court
Judge.
said overruled. I'll get this part because it'll be easier for you to stand.
Perfect.
Yes.
You already testified. There was an employment agreement with Mr. Sterling. Paragraph 6D2?
Yes.
What did 6D2 of his employment agreement provide?
Because I thought he was going to continue employment.
What did 6D2 of his employment agreement provide?
I don't remember. Sorry. This might be too hard to do.
It's way better. It's way more fun, though, because Gary is literally the worst.
Provided he would get 1 year severance. Do we need to go look at his employment agreement?
That's very possible because that was common.
You said you're happy to have a job for 90 more days, but I'm going to reduce your severance pay down to 6 months, right?
That's not what we were talking about.
Sir, if you choose to resign while on the special project status, you get 6 months severance. Isn't that what it says?
If he resigned, yes.
He only got his special projects for 90 days. So would you give him a job for maybe 90 days under these conditions we're talking about? And then if he quit, he got 6 months severance?
That's not correct. I would like to explain to the jury.
You'll get a chance. You wrote him a letter and you said, quote, your salary and benefits for 6 months, end quote. Do you see that?
Yes, I see that.
Let's go back to Exhibit 11 if we could. It's not just the fact that you're saying it, but it's your reflection.
Oh my gosh.
We're professionals. We're so professionals. I can't stop laughing, though.
All right. Let's go back to Exhibit 11 if we could. When you wrote him Exhibit 11 at the end of that month, you said, quote, you're now going to get your 12-month severance, end quote. Do you see that? First sentence of the second paragraph.
Oh, yes.
That was the deal you were trying to make to him. You could have a special projects job for 90 days if you reduce your severance down to 6 months. Right? That's what it was all about, or what it was about?
That's not correct.
What did I miss in there? Why the 6 months when you owed him 12? Tell the jury.
Because I offered him an opportunity to stay employed and come back in the company pending the completion of the investigation of the allegations from other employees in the company. And depending on that would depend on the status and the outcome. Oh, wait, I have to keep reading. Okay, so I asked Mr. Sterling if he would have an interest in working special projects from home and continue being employed from home while this investigation took place. And he said, I'll think about it. I called.
You've gone beyond my question. So you said he'd think about it, and then you sent this letter to him marked exhibit number 10, right? That's what you're testifying?
Yes.
So on an August 8th meeting where you said you fired him, you said, I would like to extend something to you and I'd like you to think about it. And you did 8 days later. Is that your testimony?
You keep referring to firing him? I didn't fire him.
I'll say we contend you fired him. On that meeting, you gave him a notice of termination. You've already established that. Do you remember doing that?
No, I don't remember doing that, but I see the exhibit, yes.
You have 2 letters you gave him, said, quote, notice of termination, end quote. On that day, August 8th, are you with me?
Yes.
There were no communications between you and him between August 8th and August 16th. Are you with me?
I called him.
Is that true? You had no communication?
No, I didn't because he didn't return calls.
Move to strike after, quote, no, because he didn't return calls, end quote. Non-responsive to the question posed. And the court said, granted. Back to Mr. Smith, you had no communication with him between those days. And your first communication was this letter you wrote him on August 16th, right?
No, that wasn't the first communication. That was the first written letter. Oh my God, I'm sorry.
Gary. Are you serious? No, it's like that wasn't the first communication. That was the first written letter. Okay, Gary, he's literally splitting hairs so much. Okay.
Yes,
don't
he
laugh.
is.
I'm baby snark back on.
Okay.
I thought we just established you had never.
Oops. Oh wait, it stopped loading. Sorry.
Oh God. Okay. Remove. Add to stream. Does it work?
Okay.
No? What the hell?
I thought
sorry.
we just established you had never.
Sorry. My lost.
What
my
did he
connection.
never do?
We don't know. We're never gonna find out. Okay. Stop. No. Okay. User error. That's okay. 192.168.1.33. Trying to thwart us, Gary Young. Oh, don't even do that. Okay. Back. Yep, we're back. Okay. Share. Live chat. Thank you for your patience. Thank you very much. Share, and then we gotta. Oh, we're not gonna have the sidebars like that. Okay, and we need to do pop out. Okay. Oh, we're not even sharing it again. Okay.
It disappeared.
Great.
I don't know where it went.
Love to see it. Gary Young, stop it.
There it goes.
Okay.
All right.
I thought we just established you had never spoken to him between August 8th and August 16th.
Can't speak to someone that's not present.
Okay. So that, I think to the jury, wouldn't that mean you had no communication with him?
Correct.
Okay. So you had no communication between the 8th and the 16th, and you wrote this letter, right?
Yes, correct.
On the 16th, you gave him a job opportunity called Special Projects for 90 days. And it just says that up to 90 days, right?
Yes.
And you could terminate him at any time within those 90 days. You could say your special projects job's up, right?
That's possible.
You said, quote, during these 90 days, end quote, in paragraph 2, that if you could go down to it, it says, quote, while on the special project status, you will work from home. You will not be allowed to enter the company premises or to communicate with company employees without specific prior approval, end quote.
Correct.
That's what the COO of the company, your special projects idea was. No communication with a single employee for 90 days.
Yes, because there was an investigation going on.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment. Since you told him he could have the special project assignment if he reduced his compensation from 6 months to 12 months, let's talk now about this investigation. A moment ago, you said there were written accusations against Mr. Sterling.
Yes.
Where are they? Those were never placed in this case. Where are those written accusations?
You had them up on the screen yesterday.
Those were yours. You wrote that.
Those were accusations from the employees. Oh, and then Mr. Toth. Okay.
Mr. Toth, Your Honor, and then we're back to Mr. Smith.
Are you saying no written accusations were given to you by employees? You just made a list of them?
No.
The court says, is there an objection?
Yes, objection, Your Honor. We're way beyond the scope of what the redirect was. We're back into just repeating questions that were asked yesterday.
Back to Mr. Smith. He just asked him about the accusations, and that was the word he used in the examination a moment ago, written accusations. The court said, overruled. Back to Mr. Smith. Well, let's go to these accusations that you say you had. I think it's exhibit number 21. Can you pull that up? Not 21, sorry, 1021. Is this what you call the accusations against Mr. Sterling?
Yes.
And I asked you, you said a moment ago, there were written accusations from employees. Where are those written accusations from the employees?
I don't know.
They got thrown away? They're not in his file?
I don't know. It was not my jurisdiction. That was the HR department.
You made this list personally?
Wait, I lost my place. Hold on.
22.
Okay, sorry. I don't recall making this list personally. It's written in second person.
Meaning Gary is the second person?
No, I'm saying I don't recall writing this one specifically.
Okay. You recall discussing this with Mr. Sterling
Yes.
at that meeting?
It was discussed in the meeting.
And you gave him no written accusations from the employees, correct? None?
Not at that time. I don't believe so.
So the letter that was marked as exhibit number 11, if we can go back to that, the reason you told everyone that Mr. Sterling was on sabbatical is so that you could get to the national convention that started on September 7th or September 5th without anyone knowing he had been fired by you, right?
No, everyone in the office knew.
Okay, so everyone in the office knew he had been fired. That's what you just said?
I didn't say he had been fired. I made it very clear he was not fired.
Everyone in the office knew he was fired, correct?
No.
And you were upset that he told people he had been fired, right?
I don't recall that.
You wrote him in an email and you said you breached the trust because you told a particular employee you had been fired. Do you remember that email?
I don't.
You don't? Yesterday we went through it. It's 1160. Let me turn your attention back to it.
Okay.
You remember 1160. You sent him on August 20th, just 4 days after you dated your letter dated August 16th. That said, if he was willing to reduce his compensation down to 6 months, he could have a special projects assignment. Do you remember that?
Yes.
On this letter, do you remember that you told him it was a big breach of trust that you told one of your company's employees, that he had been fired? Do you remember that? 6th paragraph down. Quote, after making the announcement about your temporary separation between that time and that night, over 30% of the employees voiced their pain of how you had torn the company and taken it lower than it had been in years, lower than it had ever been. I had employees come up to me following the meeting and ask, begging if Young Living could be like it used to be, a family where people were happy, end quote. Do you see that?
Correct.
Did you then not say just right after that you were upset because he said that he was terminated and not separated? Did you not say that?
It's possible. I don't recall. Oops, I forgot to highlight this. Okay, sorry. Ooh.
Sorry. We had the wrong one displayed right below. I called the wrong paragraph. It's my fault. Can you pull that higher? Quote, Dave, the most disturbing meeting I had was with Terry that afternoon, end quote. That would be the day after he's fired, right? You made the announcement in the morning. You claimed he was separated, and that afternoon you had a communication with an employee named Terry, correct?
Apparently.
So very close in time to this meeting of August 8th, just one afternoon afterwards, when you made this announcement to the company he separated, and you have Terry, an employee, come into your office, right? Right? Do you remember the question? If the 8th was on a Wednesday, Thursday the 9th, Terry comes into your office.
Okay.
You said to him, to Mr. Sterling in the letter, quote, he was very emotional, very upset, came to ask me if he could talk to me. I talked to him in the presence of Doug, end quote. Doug being who?
He was the CEO at the time.
What was his last name?
Nelson.
Doug Nelson. Doug Nelson had run the farm, and you had replaced, in one day, you had replaced David Sterling with the new COO named Doug Nelson?
Not correct.
Let's see. On the 8th, David Sterling was the COO, and you just testified Doug Nelson was the COO. That's only one day later, right?
No, it was not one day later.
Doug Nelson was a replacement COO?
He became the replacement, yes.
And you invited him to this meeting one day later?
Yes.
Doug Nelson, who became the next COO, was at the meeting. Was he at the termination meeting you had on the 8th, by the way?
I don't think so.
Quote, I wanted a witness. You promised me that when you left the board meeting Wednesday night after I'd asked you to please not share a word of this with a single person, that you wouldn't. You talked to Terry, and if Terry gave specifics, I didn't hear it because my head was spinning, but you told him you had been terminated, end quote. See that language?
Yes.
You didn't like the fact that David Sterling had told employees he had been terminated on August 8th, right?
Correct.
Next paragraph. In this next paragraph, and by the way, the reason you claimed you wanted a separation agreement later, that idea of separation came up. This little concept that you had with the employees the next meeting, the sabbatical, that was because you wanted to make sure that your convention that was happening 1 month away didn't have a problem, right? You didn't want to tell anyone you had fired your COO.
Mr. Toth, objection, compound.
Gary, that's not correct.
I'll rephrase that, Your Honor. The court said, all right. The reason that you came up with the idea for sabbatical is because you did not want anyone to know that you had fired David Sterling 1 month before your convention, correct?
That's not correct.
Did you make any type of public announcements that you had put David Sterling on sabbatical so that you could do an investigation?
I don't recall.
When you met with these employees and told them he was on sabbatical, did you tell the employees so you could conduct an investigation for 30 days?
I don't recall what I told them 10 years ago.
And then in the next paragraph down, after you have this discussion with Terry, where Mr. Sterling said, quote, I have been terminated, end quote, you then decided you wanted to move that sabbatical up to 90 days. Is that correct?
I don't recall that.
Right there, quote, you had, end quote, it says, why don't I read that paragraph? Quote, I kept calling you because I wanted to talk to you before I left. It was after this interview with Terry and our legal counsel, John Wadoops, who advised me to make it a 90-day separation, end quote. That's when it happened?
Yes.
Your email of the 20th was the first time there was a mention of a new 90-day sabbatical. Is that correct?
No, that was known from the day of August 8th.
How long did it take you to take David Sterling's name off the website?
I don't know. I wasn't responsible for that.
So before the convention, you would keep it quiet. You terminated him. Isn't that true? Because of that, you didn't take his name off the website?
Oh, shoot.
Mr. Toth, objection form.
The court says, I'm sorry, what was the objection?
Objection form. It mischaracterizes his prior testimony.
The court says, I'll have you rephrase. Back to Mr. Smith. Isn't it true that you didn't take David Sterling's name off of your company's website so you could keep his termination quiet?
No.
Well, how long did you leave his name on the website?
I don't know. I'm not responsible for the website. I don't manage the website.
Didn't Mr. Sterling have to threaten legal action to get his name off your website?
Not that I know of.
Now, the issue that deals with the data termination is kind of important. You agree? That's when the 6-month non-solicitation period runs. That's important?
Yes.
And when you wrote him his letter, the termination letter in August, didn't you tell him that he had to remember he had a non-solicitation provision and it ran from that day?
That could be.
Okay, so you wrote him a letter on August 8th that said, quote, remember, you have a non-solicitation period, end quote. That would be the best date to fix the non-solicitation period, right? The day you told him, right?
No, that was a known factor with all executives.
Okay, but you told him when you fired him, gave him the letter, quote, I remind you, you have a non-solicitation provision, end quote.
Mr. Toth, objection, Your Honor, mischaracterizes the prior testimony.
Gary says yes.
The court overruled. Back to Mr. Smith. And you did that because you wanted to make sure during the next 6 months he didn't solicit someone, right?
Correct.
And just so I understand it, your company, friends and family, you don't really expect the non-solicitation provision to apply to like a brother or sister, right? That was not the intent of Young Living?
Mr. Toth, objection calls for a legal conclusion.
The court overruled.
Gary Young, solicitation is solicitation.
Back to Mr. Smith. My question was different. If my wife was a Young Living distributor, you don't really think that solicitation provision applies to my wife, right?
Objection from Mr. Toth, asked and answered.
The court overruled. Back to Mr. Smith. You didn't expect it?
I didn't define that.
Okay, so can you answer my question though? You didn't really expect the non-solicitation to apply to my wife.
I expect it to be honored regardless.
Even if it was a wife? I couldn't speak to my wife ever again?
Objection, Your Honor, mischaracterizes his testimony.
The court says sustained. Back to Mr. Smith. Well, if you use the term, quote, call upon solicit, end quote, can I still call upon my wife?
Well, of course you can.
So you didn't mean it to apply to at least that extent, right?
Objection, Your Honor. Again, it mischaracterizes his testimony.
The court says overruled, and back to Mr. Smith, correct?
I don't know how to answer that because it was not something that was written specifically in paper that you couldn't or could solicit your wife because that's not a practice in business.
Wasn't it intended really to prohibit solicitation of people that they came to know through the company? I mean, you want to keep those names confidential?
Correct.
So if they had already known them, it wasn't intended to apply to someone they already knew. Fair?
Of course it was.
It was supposed to apply to someone they already knew?
Of course. If they were a member in the company, of course it did.
How about if it's my best friend and I know my best friend for years? You thought that non-solicitation was supposed to apply to my best friend?
Absolutely.
Even if I had done business with my best friend?
In that context, absolutely.
What would you be protecting? I already know my best friend. What was it at Young Living? What was it Young Living wanted to protect? I knew my best friend.
Can I explain?
Yeah, that's the why. Why would Young Living think it could protect me from calling upon my best friend?
As I stated earlier about organizations, if you had your organization and your best friend over here had his independent organization, maybe he was, I'm going to say, mid-level down, and you solicited him, that's called cross-recruiting.
Let's talk about that. Where would be the best spot for this little thing? The court said that worked out all right yesterday. Back to Mr. Smith. I took it down last time, and your attorney talked about cross-recruiting just a moment ago, correct?
Yes.
So cross-recruiting was prohibited by the policies and procedures?
Right.
And cross-recruiting is where, let's say let's just pick two names out, Young Living and doTERRA, make it easy for us. And if you were a distributor at Young Living, you were prohibited from recruiting anyone while in your downline or in the company over to doTERRA while you were still a distributor?
Correct.
And that's called cross-recruiting?
Correct.
Let me make sure I understand. If you are at Young Living, you could still be a doTERRA distributor, so as long as you didn't cross-recruit?
Correct.
And if you left Young Living, you could recruit all you wanted to from Young Living?
Mr. Toth, object. And then
Back to Mr. Smith. No limitation in the policies and procedures. Absolutely right to solicit anyone you wanted to at Young Living, right?
I believe so.
So the only prohibition was someone staying at Young Living and going over to doTERRA and sending people within the company over. But going over to doTERRA, you had absolute right to go solicit anyone from Young Living.
Mr. Toth, objection, compound.
The court says, I'll have you rephrase. Back to Mr. Smith. Once I went to doTERRA and you had left Young Living, you had the absolute right to solicit anyone you wanted to at Young Living?
If the distributorship was terminated, yes, that person could do that.
Even if it was my mom?
Even if it was your mom.
And my best friend that I had been with, I could do that?
If you were terminated and no longer a Young Living distributor, of course you could.
And the section you talked about, your counsel pointed out to you in those policies and procedures that only deals if you are still a Young Living distributor and a doTERRA distributor. That prohibition for what you called cross-recruiting. But it actually said, I think, a different term, unauthorized recruiting, correct?
I mean, yeah, I guess.
Okay. I think the section, it's on the record, but it was in the agreement. I can pull that up for you. It's not called cross-recruiting. That's a term your counsel used. Cross-recruiting is different, right?
Yes.
Cross-recruiting in your company is where you actually have your Young Living distributor and you move one guy from one line, maybe outside of your business, over. That's called cross-recruiting. All within Young Living, correct?
When it encompasses another downline, yes.
Yeah, within the company.
Right.
And counsel called it cross-recruiting, but that's not really what it's called in your company terms, correct?
I don't remember what it says in the policies and terminology.
Let's pull up 1136 again so we can clarify. 1136, I think counsel pointed it out, section 10.1. If we could go there. I'm doing this by memory, so I may be wrong. 3.101, thank you. 3.101 says, quote, unauthorized recruiting, end quote. That's what he was describing, right? It's not called cross-recruiting, even though he used those terms with you.
Yeah.
Unauthorized. And cross-recruiting is different. That's going within your own company, not the same deal, correct? And if you need help, just look over your policies and procedures, next paragraph, cross-line recruiting 3.10.2, that's a different issue, right?
Yeah, that's what's referred to as it says cross recruiting.
That's, again, just to be clear, that's only within your company. That's called cross recruiting. Unauthorized recruiting is going to a different company, correct?
Correct.
All right. So again, I'm not certain that changes much. You agree that your distributors were allowed to have 2 different distributorships in 2 different companies that competed, so as long as they didn't unauthorized recruit from your company over to doTERRA, correct? Oh.
Yeah, correct.
And when you have one of these distributor agreements with your distributors, you expect them to follow the contracts, right?
Correct.
So everyone expects them to, correct?
Correct.
So if you had a distributor that was at your company and signed up with doTERRA, you were perfectly fine with that. You just did not want them to do unauthorized recruiting, fair?
Correct. Oh, sorry.
Let me ask my counsel if I have any other questions, Your Honor. If I may take 1 second, the court says, yes, of course. Back to Mr. Smith. I have no other questions at this time. The court says, thank you, Mr. Smith. Any further cross, Mr. Gaylord? Mr. Gaylord says, I have no further questions, Your Honor. And the court says, either party object to excusing this witness at this time, subject to being recalled. Mr. Smith says, subject to recall, no objection, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. So the court says, thank you. You may step down. Next witness, Mr. Berger, Your Honor, would you want to take a mid-morning break at this time? Court. Do we need to read this? No. Okay. Let's skip it. Okay. Jury left the courtroom.
What are we doing?
Oh, the court's going to admonish the gallery really quickly, which I think might be, it's kind of important, but the court says, thank you. You may be seated outside the presence of the jury. I'll just admonish those in the gallery. I've had concerns raised by counsel that I'm getting some responses by those observing the testimony, nodding, shaking of the head, and so forth. The jury can see your responses, and that may be construed as you testifying. You're giving responses. You haven't been sworn. You're not under oath. You're not to respond. That prejudices both parties. I'll admonish those in the gallery not to respond to testimony. If that conduct persists, you'll be removed. Oh, snap. So recess. Okay, these are all stuff I don't understand. So they're arguing about stuff. Jury comes back in. Now we're at Rob James. Let's take a chat break. Where's my chat break? Okay.
I love Gary in that voice.
Gary as Baby Snark is way better than Gary as me. It's way more enjoyable. It breaks it up more. And Gary being obnoxious with like high pitched helium voice is the best.
And the inflections that you were making with it. Brilliant.
Convenient how no one in Young Living ever knows anything. It is convenient, Kira. Oh, I would have been eating value. You're listening to Gary being dumb, in my opinion. That's good for the defendant's side because Gary looks like he's being evasive on purpose, and the jury's going to pick up on that. Mm-hmm. So I bet that he likes
occasions.
It. Yep, on multiple occasions. Baby Snark makes Gary way more ingestible, I guess, for digestible. I don't know. It's way more pleasant to listen to Gary be Gary. Oh,
very professional.
I think that's why lawyers have to go to school. Just yep. And I think they're playing a strategy in their head. They're trying to. There's a lots of things. Yep, and that's why Gary Young is why doTERRA won. Literally Gary.
Yeah.
Damn it, Gary. Literally Gary. Oh my gosh.
He did that to himself.
Yeah. Live chat. What do y'all think so far? Obviously we're prejudiced, like we're biased, I guess. We don't really like Gary Young. We're listening to him be evasive. We're listening to him argue about the difference between religious and spiritual and moonlighting as a doctor. Oh, I'm not moonlighting as a doctor. I'm just part of a surgical crew. Okay, so he does that all the time. What do y'all think? What is or replay crew? What do y'all think? Do y'all think Gary's been being a little evasive? And if this is the first video you've heard of us, it's all in a playlist. We're, oh gosh, 6 videos
It's
in at
worth
this
it
point.
to go
It's
back
worth it. Yeah.
and watch.
And if you're a
Great for when
pro,
you're wanting to like clean the house, do things, have something on in the background if you have to drive somewhere.
Yep. And if you're pro Young Living, or if you don't understand what's going on, or you think there's a lot of misinformation going around about Young Living, start at the beginning of the playlist. I mean, we're literally reading straight. Well, you can't see that. We're reading straight from the transcripts from the trial. So this isn't us like, yeah, we obviously have an opinion. I'm reading Gary Young Baby Snark. It's not very polite, I guess, but I'm going to keep doing it. These are from the court. This is literally what Gary Young said. And as we go through, there's going to be evidence that shows Gary moonlighting as a doctor. And if it was anybody else, if you're pro Young Living, or if you're pro like, hey, there's misinformation going around, I don't believe any of that. Take it out of this context. If you knew of someone pretending to be a doctor, performing surgeries on people, performing medical procedures on people without a medical license, and you feel some kind of way about that, you have to feel some kind of way about Gary Young doing it. And Gary Young doing it well up until he passed away in 2018. I think, to be fair, it seems like. So, and if you don't feel that kind of way about Gary Young, but you do feel strongly about someone else doing it, you have to take a look at your biases.
There's going to be a lot of cognitive dissonance going on there.
Yep.
And a struggle, which, I mean, to be fair, like whenever somebody is in MLM and they're kind of learning about anti-MLM arguments and moving on out, when they have like one foot on each side, there is a lot of that kind of turmoil going on in your head of cognitive dissonance and just frustration around that. And that doesn't feel good. I know exactly how that feels, how that felt. And it took a while to work through that.
Yep. Okay. Let me go ahead and play okay, now we're at Rob James. So I'm going to play I use these to help me break it up, because some of y'all might be sick of Gary Young and you want to listen to Rob. So it's going to be hyperlinked in the description, where you can just click and go straight to who you want to listen to. So I'm going to go ahead, and this is going to be the direct examination of Rob James. All right. Since Kat did most of the reading last time, I'll be Mr. Berger.
Okay.
And
I will
you can be Rob if you want.
James.
Yep.
Yes. James.
All right. So, having been first duly sworn to tell the truth, was examined and testified as follows. That was said about Rob James. Mr. Berger, I need to put his little tab up so we know who's talking. Mr. Berger is the Young Living attorney. And again, Young Living's the plaintiff. They go first. That's why the Young Living attorney is talking first in these situations. So, direct examination. Good morning, Mr. James.
Hi.
My name is Art Berger. I'm a lawyer, and I represent the plaintiff, Young Living. In this case, I have a few questions for you today.
Sure.
First of all, are you currently a doTERRA distributor?
Yes.
And is your distributorship held in your name?
Me and my wife.
What's your wife's name?
Wendy James.
Wendy James. And when did you become a doTERRA distributor? Do you recall?
I don't remember the exact date. I've seen emails, I think, but
was it about mid-February of 2008?
Mid or late February, I think.
Of 2008?
Yes.
And so you've been a doTERRA distributor, if my math is right, for about 9 years.
Yeah.
And does the majority of your income come from your doTERRA distributorship?
Yes.
And you were actually had the distinction of being the first distributor to sign up with doTERRA. Isn't that correct?
Yes. I think chronologically, yeah.
And what's your distributor number?
1002.
Now, is there anyone with a lower number at doTERRA as a distributor than you?
Yes.
Mr. Gaylord. Mr. Gaylord, objection, foundation, withdrawn. Okay. Mr. Berger, I'm sorry. What was your answer?
Yes, there is. I just have to stop right there because it is so hard for like all these like close-ended questions. Just with my profession, it's like I'm trained to not do close-ended questions so much.
Yep.
And so it's just like
It's
hard.
completely opposite in
Yeah.
yep.
So I just feel like I'm just yes, and that's it. But I understand why they have to do that. It's completely different, but yeah.
Yep. Let me just put this up real quick. Kira said, if this makes you feel uncomfortable, you need to ask why and ask those of Young Living and don't take half-assed beat around the bush answers. Yep. I don't think we will ever get a real answer on why they won't release testing results. Yep. Okay. And who is that?
Justin Harrison.
Yep. Sorry. And what's his number?
1001.
So if you joined before him, why does he have a lower number than you? Mr. Smith. Okay, Mr. Smith, objection, lack of foundation. Judge says sustained. Mr. Berger. So Mr. Harrison is in your upline, correct?
Yes.
And you're in his downline?
Yes.
And you're the first person in his downline. Is that correct?
Yes.
And of all the distributors at doTERRA, is he the only one that's above you?
Yes.
And have you worked with Mr. Harrison over the years?
Not a lot, no.
Not a lot? Has he helped you? Mr. Smith, I think he said not a lot. Did I mishear him? Witness.
Not a lot, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Berger, have you ever done events together, distributor recruiting events with Mr. Harrison over the years?
I don't remember any.
Okay. Has he supported your efforts to grow your distributorship at doTERRA?
Yes.
And what has he done to assist you, Mr. James?
Mostly my wife was involved in the details of our downline.
Okay.
And so he's worked with Wendy more than myself.
Okay. And so you don't recall any of Mr. Harrison's efforts to assist your downline. We'd have to speak to Wendy about that. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't recall any specific meetings we did together.
I'm sorry. I didn't hear that well, Your Honor.
I'm sorry. We didn't do any specific meetings together that I remember.
Mr. Berger says, do you know, Mr. James, as we sit here today, how many distributors you have in your downline? Mr. Gaylord says, objection, relevance. Judge says, overruled. Rob James.
I would say it's hundreds of thousands or millions.
What? I'm
Whoa.
sorry. Whoa. Mr. Berger said, and among those hundreds of thousands of people in your downline, Gina Truman is a member of your downline, correct?
Yes.
And is she considered a founding distributor of doTERRA?
Yes.
What is a founding distributor?
In the beginning, I think they set some benchmarks that you have reached a certain plateau in a certain amount of time, and you got a founders group, and they receive a yearly bonus.
And to your knowledge, she's in the founders club.
Yes.
And are you a founding distributor as well, Mr. James?
Yes.
So you met those benchmarks as well?
Yes.
So have you worked with Gina Truman in connection with your doTERRA business?
Yes.
And how regularly do you interact with Miss Truman?
Not a lot. For me personally, not much at all.
Okay. Would that be more Wendy that's interacting with Miss Truman than you? Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you know when Gina Truman signed up to be a doTERRA distributor?
I think around the same time we did. I don't remember exactly when that was.
So about February of 2008, is that correct?
I think at the end of February, maybe.
Of 2008?
Yeah.
And to your knowledge, Miss Truman used to be a Young Living distributor, correct?
Yes.
And is Boyd Truman, do you know Mr. Truman, Boyd Truman?
Yes.
Is he in your downline as well?
Yes.
And he was a former Young Living distributor, correct?
I believe so.
All right. When Tamalu Watkins, do you know Miss Watkins?
Yes.
And is she in your doTERRA downline?
Yes, I think so.
There's no... I'm just gonna take a break for a second. There's no. It's okay. It's Justin. Then it's Art or Rob James. And that's the literal top of the master pyramid. There's nobody else above them. So of course they're in your downline.
Yeah.
Jeez. Okay. Sorry. I don't need, how many? I think we're at the top. Okay. All right. So when,
Hamalu. 8.
Yep, number 8.
Yes.
And is she in your doTERRA downline?
Yes, I think so.
It is Miss Watkins, a former Young Living distributor.
I believe so.
Mr. James, are you familiar with David Sterling?
Yes.
All right. How many years have you known Mr. Sterling?
All right. Wait. We met back in probably 83 or so.
Okay, so you've known him since 1983?
Yeah.
Correct. You served a mission with him, is that correct?
Yes.
And are you personal friends?
Yes.
Were you the best man at his wedding?
I think I was one of them. How do you think
How would you
that
not
were best
know?
man at
Give
a
me a
wedding?
break, bro. Okay, I want to turn your attention to this to the time frame of September 2007. So before you became a doTERRA distributor. I'm wondering if you remember receiving a call from Mr. Sterling in September of 2007.
Yes.
And at the time he called you, the two of you hadn't spoken for quite some time. Is that right?
Correct. Well, we maybe emailed, but not spoken.
And by that time, the two of you hadn't spoken long enough that his hair had turned white in the interim. Is that right?
Probably, yes.
So it had been some time that you had spoken with him.
Yes.
All right. Do you understand that he called you shortly after he left Young Living?
I don't recall, but I think so from the emails.
Okay. And do you remember anything about that conversation that the two of you had in September of 2007?
Not specifics. I just remember he wanted to come down to our home and visit us.
And where do you live, Mr. James?
St. George, Utah.
Did you live in St. George at the time in September of 2007?
Yes.
All right. Do you remember talking about essential oils during that phone call with Mr. Sterling?
No, I don't remember.
Are you saying that you did not, or you can't remember one way or the other?
I can't remember whether or not we did. I don't believe so.
You don't remember him talking to you about an idea he had for a new essential oils company?
No, not over the phone then. It might have been during the visit, but not over the phone.
Okay. And Mr. Sterling came down to visit you and Wendy in St. George, is that right?
Yes.
So did he call you on as he was driving down?
I don't know if he was driving down or not.
Mr. James, I'd like to hand you a binder of exhibits. There's a couple ways we can do that.
Mr. Berger,
okay.
Your Honor, if I may approach.
Of course.
Mr. Berger says, we have some very large binders. This one is a little smaller. It might be easier for you to look through. Your Honor, I have one for you as well.
Okay, thank you.
Wait, I don't know why I started talking about.
You're good. It's okay. Mr. James, could you please turn to tab 184? Each of the exhibits is tabbed with a corresponding number. Just let me know when you're there, please.
I'm there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. James, do you recognize this document?
No, I mean, it looks like it's from me, but I don't remember.
It's an email exchange between you and David Sterling?
Yeah.
Dated September 17th, 2007 and September 18th, 2007?
Yes.
And did you write that email to Mr. Sterling and receive it in the email back from Mr. Sterling?
Looks like I did. Like I say, I don't remember the specific email, but yeah, it looks that way.
I move the admission of 184, Your Honor. And then Judge, any objection? And then Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith says, I'm sorry, did you say 24 or 184?
I can know one year. Okay, 184.
Objection, irrelevant, says Mr. Smith.
Okay. What's the relevance? And then me, Your Honor goes to the initial meeting with Mr. Sterling and the development of smooth move. Okay. All right. Court overruled. And then 184 is received then, Your Honor. And then judge says yes. Then Mr. Berger. If you'll put that up, Susan. Mr. James, I'd like to direct your attention to the first email in this document. And as emails typically print out, they're in reverse chronological order.
Yes.
So the first email toward the bottom is an email from you to Mr. Sterling dated September 17th. Susan, if you could move down, please. Sorry, trying to catch up to you, Mr. James. September 17th email. Thank you. Sorry about that delay, Mr. James. So you wrote to Mr. Sterling on September 17th, 2007. David, it was so great to talk to you. I'm so glad you found me. I have no excuse for not doing it myself. We won't lose track this time. It is amazing you called and that you worked for Young Living. Wendy and I were seriously just praying and deciding whether to get back into oils. We called the people that we knew that were most into it, trying to get a feeling one way or another. It will be good to have your input. Does that refresh your Sorry, I should have said quote and unquote. Does that refresh your recollection whether you talked about oils in that conversation with Mr. Sterling in September of 2007?
Yeah, I still can't remember it, but yeah, I assume we did.
Okay. And then if you could look at Mr. Sterling's response to you, the third paragraph in his response is dated the next day, September 18th, 2007. It says, quote, I'll never grow tired of talking about the essential oils. The oils have something of a mission to perform that is bigger than me, Gary, or anyone else. I'll have to share more with you later, end quote. Did I read that correctly, Mr. James?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you know Emily Wright?
Yes.
And when do you recall first meeting Miss Wright?
I can't remember. I think it was at the Coral Canyon meeting.
So would that be approximately December of 2007?
Mr. Smith says objection, no foundation for the question posed.
The court overruled.
I don't know when it was. I remember it was at Coral Canyon.
Okay, so whenever that meeting was, that's when you met Miss Wright?
Yeah.
Mr. James, let's see if we can maybe help you recall that date. This isn't the first time you've answered questions about this case, is it?
No.
You had your deposition taken?
Yeah.
Some time ago?
Yep.
It was actually on March 19th, 2014. Is that correct?
I wouldn't know, but yeah, it was 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay. All right. And in your deposition, you were asked questions by lawyers and you gave answers, correct?
Uh-huh.
And you were sworn in and you promised to testify under oath, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you gave blah, blah, blah. And you gave that deposition testimony at least 3 years, maybe more, closer to the events in question than today. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'd just like to show you a little portion of your deposition testimony, see if it helps refresh your recollection.
Sure.
This is the original transcript of your deposition. So, Your Honor, the court says, yes, of course. Mr. Berger says, and I'll break the seal and hand you that. I'll ask you to turn to page 18 of your deposition transcript. Are you there?
Uh-huh.
And if you could follow along with me, I'm going to read lines 13 to 19.
Mr. Smith said objection, improper impeachment, not a party.
Judge said, I'm sorry. What was the last part?
Improper impeachment, not a party.
Response. And then Mr. Berger says, I'm using it to refresh his recollection.
Mr. Smith says he can read it without reading it to the jury to refresh his recollection. It's an improper reading.
The judge said, if you want to read it to yourself, please. And then I forgot to type, like, Mr. Berger, yes. Would you read lines 13 through 19, Mr. James? And then the judge said, just read it to yourself. Mr. Berger, to yourself. Yes, thank you. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Does that refresh your recollection as to when you first met Miss Wright?
Yes. If the Noah's meeting was prior to the Coral Canyon meeting, yes, it does.
Okay. And then so you met her in December of 2007, correct?
Yes.
And you mentioned the Noah's meeting a couple of times. Was that a meeting for the company that became doTERRA?
That was the name of the building where we met.
Oh, Noah's. So Noah's is an event center, correct?
Correct.
Do you remember where that is?
It's Linden or American Fork.
And did you attend the meeting then?
Yes.
And what was the purpose of that meeting?
I think it was just introducing doTERRA and what it would be.
Okay, and how did you hear about that meeting?
I think Dave invited us.
Okay. Do you remember how he invited you? Did he send you an email?
I believe so. I don't remember for sure.
Okay. Could you turn in your booklet with the tabs to Exhibit 13, please? Could you please take a look at Exhibit 13, Mr. James? I'll ask you whether that email correspondence between you and Mr. Sterling dated December 12th and December 27th, 2007. Is that correct?
Looks to be, yes.
Your Honor, move the admission of Exhibit 13. Mr. Gaylord says objection, relevance, and Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith says, I would object under 403 on the email that's at the top dated December 12th.
The court says, this is 13. Did I hear that right? Mr. Berger said, correct, Your Honor. The court says this is relevant as to the timing. Is that Mr. Berger? You're absolutely right, Your Honor. Yes. Judge overruled. Mr. Berger. So 13 is received. The court says yes. Mr. Berger said this is a Google email exception. That's an exception, Mr. James, to the order emails are often printed. With Google, the first email appears on the top and the second email appears on the bottom. They do things differently. I'd like to turn your attention to the second email, September 27th email.
Okay.
Susan, if you can go to the second page, third to the last paragraph. This is a portion of the email that Mr. Sterling wrote to you, Mr. James, on December 27th. So it's page 2 of Exhibit 13. If you could turn to that and read along with me.
Okay.
It says, quote, so you know, end quote. This is from Mr. Sterling to you. Quote, we're having the first ever meeting for the new company this coming Saturday, the 29th, end quote. That's December 29th. Quote, it will be from 1:30 to 3:30 and consists primarily of teaching on the oils by Dr. Hill. I'll just say end quote and requote. End quote, quote, it's been limited to only about 20 people, mostly made up of serious leaders who, with their wives, want to understand more about the oils. I know this is very short notice, but you and Wendy are certainly invited. If you can't make it, there will be other meetings too. You mentioned some interesting ideas in participating and or doing some creative writing. End quote. Quote. I'm doing this so wrong. There will be a lot of need for this in all areas from brochures to web content. If you guys are serious about building a business, this could be a great opportunity as it is ground floor. End quote. Do you see that paragraph, Mr. James?
First off, to stop. Made up of serious leaders who with their wives. What about the serious leaders who with their husbands? Like, or with their just by themselves? Like,
and I haven't met one distributor where the woman is not the one leading the charge. In
the
Young
serious
Living.
leader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me a break. Freaking misogyny and patriarchy and all the other stuff. Like, what the hell?
Yes. And of course, a great opportunity. It's the ground floor.
Yep.
So now, if you are thinking about joining doTERRA, it is not a great opportunity. It was not then, but especially more now.
Yep.
And they know that it is easier in the beginning. So that's why they said that.
Yep.
Okay. So yes.
Is that the invitation that you received from Mr. Sterling to attend this meeting at Noah's?
Yes.
And if you could turn to the first paragraph in that same email, so on page 1 toward the bottom of the page, do you see the paragraph that begins, quote, even though I'm not at Young Living anymore or Young Living or YL anymore, end quote. Do you see that?
Yes.
If you go down to the third to the last line that Mr. Sterling writes to you in that paragraph, it says right here, you see that? Quote, you would love Justin. He's an excellent trainer with a great knowledge of the oils and a person who is always happy, though he's very unhappy at YL right now. He has been with YL for over 8 years and is beloved by the field, end quote. That's the email you received from Mr. Sterling, correct?
Yes.
So was the purpose of that meeting, Mr. James, to introduce this new company?
Yeah, from what I remember.
Mr. Smith
Says objection, calls for speculation.
Judge says sustained, and then Mr. Berger. So you attended this meeting, correct?
Yes.
All right. Do you recall who else was there, Mr. James?
No, I don't. I know Dr. Hill was and Sterling was.
Did you say Sterling? I'm sorry.
Yeah, David Sterling and his wife Laurier. And I don't remember for sure after that.
Okay. And I believe you testified you met Emily Wright at this meeting, so she was there as well.
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Okay.
I just wanted you to confirm. I believe you testified earlier that Miss Wright was at this meeting. Is that correct?
If I testified before, then that's correct. I don't remember for sure now.
Do you remember anyone else who was at the meeting?
I remember some potential distributors. I don't think I ever saw them again after that meeting. I know Dave Cook was there.
Sorry. Dave Cook, did you say?
I'm sorry, Greg Cook.
Greg Cook was the... Yep, sorry. Greg Cook was there. Okay. Do you remember any other distributors or potential distributors? Whoops, sorry,
No.
sorry. Okay. Do you remember seeing any Young Living distributors there?
I wouldn't have known any except the Trumans, but no.
Were the Trumans there at this meeting?
No, I don't believe so.
But you don't recall one way or the other. Is that correct?
I don't believe they were there.
Okay.
I don't recall.
Okay. Was the company called doTERRA at that point? Do you recall?
No, it wasn't. In fact, the billboard outside the boardroom said Greg Cook Oils.
Greg Cook Oils?
Yeah.
Is that what doTERRA was called before it became doTERRA?
I don't know. That's what the board at the meeting was.
At least it was called Greg Cook Oils that day, correct?
Yes.
All right. Do you recall Mr. Hill giving a presentation on the oils at this meeting?
Yes.
Oh my God.
I don't know why, but it's
yes.
It reminds me of like cooking oils.
Yes.
Like blends of olive oil and avocado oil. That's funny.
Okay. And do you recall him talking about their new company's mission statement, or vision and mission statement?
Vaguely, I do.
Okay. Do you remember what David Hill said about doTERRA's vision and mission statement?
Mr. Smith said, objection, hearsay.
Judge sustained. Mr. Berger, did you receive sample oils at that meeting, Mr. James?
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
Do you recall which ones they were?
Not for sure, no. I know lavender and lemon. I don't remember if...
Do you recall who, other than David Hill, who else presented at that meeting?
Mr. Smith said, objection, assumes facts not in evidence.
Judge said overruled.
No.
And then Mr. Berger. You don't recall whether Mr. Sterling or Miss Wright presented at that meeting?
I don't remember for sure. I'm sorry.
Did you have a chance to speak with Mr. Sterling at that meeting?
Yes.
So you remember speaking with Mr. Sterling at that meeting? And okay, forget it. Okay. And do you remember what the two of you discussed?
No.
Did you have a chance to speak with David Hill at that meeting?
Yes.
What did you discuss with him?
Mr. Smith says objection, hearsay.
And the court said sustained. Mr. Berger, do you recall how long that meeting lasted?
Not specifically, no.
It lasted more than a few minutes, though, I would assume.
Yes.
Did it last a couple of hours?
I couldn't tell. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Okay, nope. There's nothing to apologize for. Let me ask you to turn to your deposition, see if that refreshes your recollection about the duration of the meeting. Could you turn to page 37, Mr. James? Could you turn to lines 18 through 21 and just read those to yourself?
Okay.
Does that refresh your recollection about how long approximately the meeting lasted?
It doesn't help my recollection, but I know now.
You believe the meeting lasted about 2 hours?
Yes.
How did you feel as you left the meeting that day, Mr. James?
I think me and my wife were kind of excited about it.
And what was exciting about the meeting? What excited you?
Just the prospects of being able to do something with a new company.
Okay, and at that point, you wanted to be involved in the new company, correct?
I'm not sure if we wanted to be involved as distributors, but we wanted to be involved with it.
In some way?
Yeah,
All right, and it's true that Mr. Sterling wanted you to be part of that company, correct?
I think so. Mr. Smith says, objection, foundation.
Judge says overruled. Mr. Berger, your answer, I'm sorry.
Where's it?
Line 14. You're good.
Did you? Oh, I don't know.
Did you receive an email from Mr. Sterling shortly after the NOAA's meeting?
I don't know. Did I?
Well, as a matter of fact, I think you did. Could you turn to Exhibit 14 in your exhibit binder? Please. Are you there?
Yes.
You beat me there. Do you recognize this as an email exchange that you had with David Sterling where he wrote an email to you on December 28th, 2007, and you responded on December 30th, 2007?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move the admission of 14. Mr. Gaylord says,
Objection, relevance.
Mr. Smith.
Smith says we've objected on 401, 402, and 403.
Okay, Mr. Berger. The focus, Your Honor, is on page 2, if that helps. Judge says, sure. Mr. Berger says towards the end of Mr. James's email at the top, and then Mr. Sterling's response. Dang it. I forgot to highlight. Sorry.
Where?
The number 12, the judge says overruled. And then Mr. Gaylord.
Mr. Gaylord says, Your Honor, could I raise one more objection? He's using it to refresh his recollection. Doesn't have to have the document in. It's not relevant to the issues in this case.
The court said, I'll allow it. Relevance is a rather low bar.
Mr. Gaylord says, thank you.
Mr. Berger, so that's admitted. Your Honor, it's received. And then the judge says, yes, it's received. By Mr. Berger, could you turn to page 2 of that exhibit 14, Mr. James?
All right.
Ugh. Sorry. User error. Okay. And I want to start with the email at the bottom from Mr. Sterling to you, and that's dated December 30th, 2007. Mr. Sterling says at the very top, quote, Rob, it was great to see you and Wendy again. I can't believe you drove all the way up from St. George just to attend our meeting, but I'm glad you did, end quote. Mr. Sterling wrote that to you right after the NOAA's meeting. Is that correct?
Yes.
And if you look at the third person there, the one that starts, And if you look at the third paragraph there, the one that starts, quote, as far as stomping around in your field of dreams, end quote. Do you see that?
Yes.
Mr. Sterling says, quote, I'm quite serious about exploring several opportunities with you and Wendy. I have no doubt that you could build a very productive and energetic group per your leadership. Your cooking show and writing abilities accentuate your efforts. I'm excited to discuss some ideas, strategies with you as we are able to get moving here, end quote. Did I read that correctly, Mr. James?
Yes.
All right. And then you responded to Mr. Sterling. Actually didn't respond. It was an email that you sent to him 2 days earlier. Oh, man. Sorry. Let me highlight this.
Is that me? Let's see.
And Susan, if you can go to page 2. And you said to Mr. Sterling in the fourth paragraph, despite my recent setback in speech, quote, despite my recent setback in speech, I feel that one of my best qualities, besides writing, is that of a great presenter, organizer, and recruiter. I've been successful in building, managing, and motivating downlines for both Young Living and Pure Works MLM companies, end quote. That's a true statement that you said there, isn't it, Mr. James?
Uh-huh.
Do you remember having a telephone call with Mr. Sterling a day or two after the NOAA's meeting?
No.
Are you denying that you made a phone call, or are you just saying you don't remember?
No, I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you admit that one of your thoughts about strategy concerning doTERRA was that it would be effective to recruit existing Young Living distributors to build that new company?
Say again? I'm sorry.
Certainly. You'd admit one of your thoughts about strategy in this written email where Mr. Sterling was talking about your ideas and strategies. You'd admit that one of your thoughts about strategy was that it would be effective to recruit young living distributors to build a new company, correct?
You know, in the beginning, at the first, we were probably more interested in maybe having a job with corporate rather than as an MLM.
I'm sorry, you may have misunderstood my question. I wasn't asking about what you were going to do specifically. I'm just asking whether you'd admit that, well, let me back up. Susan, can you go to the bottom of page 2, that third paragraph? Mr. Sterling says, he writes to you, quote, I'm excited to discuss some ideas/strategies with you as we're able to get moving here, end quote. Do you see that, Mr. James?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm wondering if at that time, one of your ideas about strategy was that it would be effective to recruit young living distributors to build a new company. Is that one of your ideas?
I'm not sure if it was at that time, but at some time we talked about that, yes.
Okay. And that's something that you discussed with Mr. Sterling, correct?
I don't remember.
You're not saying you didn't, you're just saying you don't recall.
Correct.
And Mr. James, let me ask you to turn to your deposition again, page 39. Are you at page 39?
Yes.
If you could please look at lines 22 and then read through page 40 at line 6.
Okay.
Just tell us when you're done, please. Take your time.
Okay.
Have you read that?
Yeah.
Does that refresh your recollection as to whether you discussed recruiting young living distributors to build the new company with Mr. Sterling?
I'm sorry, it doesn't refresh my recollection, but
But did you discuss that with Mr. Sterling?
I'll say I said it in my deposition. It could have been, but I'm not sure.
Do you recall Mr. Sterling's response?
No.
Did Mr. Sterling talk to you about how important it would be to transition some of the young living field to the new oils company?
Mr. Smith says objection, lack of foundation.
Judge says overruled.
I don't recall that he did.
Mr. Berger, so could you go back to your deposition, Mr. James, and review, go to page 40, go to line 18,
Okay.
and read 18 through 21 to yourself.
Okay.
Does that refresh your recollection as to whether Mr. Sterling talked about it being important to transition some of the young living field to the new oil company?
Mr. Smith says objection. Question is vague as to time.
Okay, court said, why don't you rephrase? Me? Mr. Berger? Well, we're talking about at the time of the NOAA's meeting or within a few days after that. And my question is whether Mr. Sterling at that time talked about how that it would be important to transition some of the young living field to the new oil company.
Mr. Smith says objection. Vague as to time still.
Judge says overruled. And then witness?
It might have been. I don't specifically remember it.
Mr. Berger said, okay.
But
I understand we turned to your deposition because that was 3 years closer to the time to the events than now. That's why I keep referring you back there, Mr. James.
sure.
And did you come up with a plan to transition young living distributors to the new essential oils company, doTERRA?
Mr. Smith says objection. Vague as to time.
Judge says sustained. Mr. Berger, shortly after the meeting at NOAA's, Mr. James, did you come up with a plan to transition the young living field to doTERRA?
I'm not sure when it might have been, but at some point we talked about doing that.
Okay, and did you have a name for that plan, Mr. James?
Yeah. Smooth move.
Can I have you turn to Exhibit 33, please, in your binder? Before you look at that, Mr. James, I just want to ask a few questions.
Sure.
The smooth move plan involved marshaling a big fish from Young Living and transitioning them to doTERRA. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
He didn't remember anything and now he remembers stuff? I'm confused.
And marshaling a big fish. That's just
Yes.
weird terminology to
Yeah.
me. But
Yep. And it specifically included marshaling big fish like the Trumans to doTERRA, correct?
yes.
And Justin Harrison as well, right?
I don't know. I don't think I knew him for some time. I'm not sure I met him or knew he was a person.
How about Thomas Oldroyd? It included marshaling him as well, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And other young living distributors as well.
I didn't know many others. I don't think I knew any others.
Okay, Mr. James, you created a second code name for your plan, correct? You had Operation Smooth Move. Do you remember another code name? Do you remember Operation True Line?
I don't remember.
See, they should have objected to compound because you're only allowed to ask one question at a time, but that's okay.
Hmm.
From what I understand, because they said, do you remember another code name? He should have said yes or no, and then he said, what was that called or whatever.
That's true.
Fine. Do you
I don't remember.
Okay. You're saying that.
I don't recall. I'm sorry.
Okay, don't be sorry at all. So the point of Operation Smooth Move was to marshal big fish like at least the Trumans and Oldroyds, correct?
Correct. Also, Smooth Move sounds like a digestive oil.
Yes, it does. And there's also a tea that's called Smooth Move tea, and it is of the same thing that you think that it is for. So it's just weird thinking about it. Okay.
11.
Okay. Can I have you turn to page 2 of Exhibit 33? Take a look at pages 2 through 4. I'll ask if you wrote that document, Mr. James.
Yeah. Yes. I don't remember it specifically, but it seems I did.
All right. Your Honor, I move the admission of Exhibit 33. Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith says objection, lack of foundation, and hearsay with respect to the email by this witness purported by this witness.
Judge said you're referring to page 2, 2 through the end.
Mr. Smith says yes, Your Honor.
Court says response. Mr. Berger says, well, we're moving the entirety of the exhibit, Your Honor. Mr. James has just authenticated 2 through 4, pages 2 through 4. I can't imagine there's a contest as to authenticity of the first page given the authors and recipients. And then Judge, I think the objection to the last 3 pages was hearsay. Mr. Berger, also, Your Honor, this was designated by defendants as Trial Exhibit 1007. They waived that objection.
Mr. Smith said, no, Your Honor, do not waive the objection.
Judge said, I don't have the document handy that had the objections made on it.
Mr. Smith says, it identifies hearsay as an objection.
Mr. Berger said, I don't know if we want to approach on this or if we continue to argue. Judge says, come on up. Sidebar discussion. Mr. Berger said, all right, Mr. James, if you could. Mr. Gaylord, okay.
Mr. Gaylord says, Your Honor, I'm sorry, Mr. Berger. Can you inform that objection was sustained, correct?
And then Judge says, yes.
Mr. Gaylord says, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Berger, could you turn to page 3 of Exhibit 33?
And the witness says, okay. And Mr. Smith says, Your Honor, if all of you used to refresh your recollection, the question has to be asked first before the witness is shown the document to refresh. The use right now is inappropriate.
Okay, Judge says, well, at the time being, I think he's just getting to the right page. We'll let the questioning proceed and see how it goes.
Mr. Smith says, all right.
Mr. Berger, could you look at the first full paragraph and there's a caption there or a title? Do you see that in bold?
Mr. Smith says, objection, Your Honor. My objection is now pointing to the document.
Oh my God. Oh, Judge said I will sustain that objection, Mr. Berger. Mr. James, you testified that you couldn't recall Operation True Line, correct?
I couldn't recall it.
Would you please look at that paragraph? Your Honor, perhaps I can indicate it so I don't reveal what's in that paragraph. May I approach?
Mr. Smith says, yeah, if you could point it out to us too, come back this way. Thank you.
Mr. Berger, if you can just tell me when you've read that, Mr. James.
Okay.
Does that refresh your recollection about Operation True Line?
Not really. I can speculate on what it was.
Well, I'm just wondering if reading that paragraph helps you to remember that it was your best recollection.
I think it was just 2. And then Mr. Gaylord says, object, Your Honor. That's a yes or no, whether it refreshes his recollection.
And then Rob.
I'm sorry. No, it doesn't.
Mr. Berger. So, Mr. James, is it true that by January of 2008, if you can put yourself in that time frame, by January of 2008, you and Mr. Sterling were having conversations about how you could recruit existing Young Living distributors to the new oil company? Is that true?
Mr. Smith says objection, hearsay, and 403.
The court said overruled.
The witness, I don't remember conversations about that.
Mr. Berger said, okay, are you saying that they didn't happen or that you don't recall?
That I don't recall.
Miss Sater, could you play clip 7, please?
Mr. Smith says objection. If the witness doesn't recall, can't be used to impeach the witness.
Judge said, is this a clip from a deposition or what are we talking about? Mr. Berger says, yes, Your Honor. Mr. Smith.
It has to be impeachment of the witness. It's not impeachment of the witness. Mr. Gaylord says you can use the deposition to refresh.
Okay, Mr. Berger, Mr. James, why don't you turn to page 57 of your deposition, please, lines 2 through 6.
Okay.
Does that refresh your recollection whether by January of 2008 you were having discussions with Mr. Sterling about how you could recruit Young Living distributors to the new oil company?
It doesn't help my recollection, but I'm reading it.
Is that correct?
I can assume.
Could you turn to Exhibit 34 in your exhibit binder?
Mr. Gaylord says, excuse me, Art, what exhibit number?
34.
Thank you.
Are you there?
Fact witness, yes.
All right, you beat me again. Is this an email string between you and Mr. Sterling on January 16th, 2008?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move the admission of 34.
Mr. Gaylord says objection, relevance, confusing, and Mr. Smith says I join, Your Honor. Join in 403. If this goes to plan, we've had enough.
The court said, point me to the relevant portion that I highlighted the wrong color. That's fine. We know it's Mr. Berger. Sure, Your Honor. It's on page 1, right in the middle, the 6th paragraph in that first sentence. Hopefully, we're in the same place. Judge says, I've counted 6, so I don't think I could be too far off. Mr. Berger, we would argue the timing. What? We would argue the timing of solicitations. Judge says, okay, overruled.
And
Mr. Gaylord.
Mr. Gaylord says, Your Honor, can I raise one more? He indicated it's by whom. There's no reference to anybody. So we're concerned that it's by whom.
The court said, so the objection is as to...
Mr. Gaylord says, if he wants to refresh his recollection, by whom? All distributors? By whom?
The judge said, so your objection is to relevance or...
Mr. Gaylord back continues to be to relevance and refresh your recollection because he wants to refresh about by whom.
Oh my God. I need a lawyer to understand.
This is the most times I've said whom.
I know. My whole life, yeah. I think the portion that's been referred to here is relevant to the theory, so I'll allow it. Go ahead. Mr. Berger, is 34 received, Your Honor? Judge says 34 is received. Mr. Berger, this is an email from Mr. Sterling to you, Mr. James, at least page 1, dated January 16th, 2008. Is that correct?
Yes.
And if you could go to actually put it up on the screen, you'll see it on your monitor as well, the 6th paragraph. The first sentence says, this is from Mr. Sterling to you. I'm so anxious to start talking strategies with you in terms of business building, knowledge, databases, EO cooking shows, recruiting of existing Young Living distributors, and potential help with our own EDR, end quote. And I forgot to opening quote. Sorry. Did I read that correctly?
No EO cooking shows.
Yes.
Absolutely not. Yes.
And Mr. James, it's true that the Trumans and Thomas Oldroyds were recruited from Young Living to join doTERRA, right?
Yes.
Let's turn to Exhibit 15. Are you there?
Yes.
Is this an email exchange between you and David Sterling dated January 27th, 2008 and January 24th, 2008?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move the admission of 15. Oh, objection. Okay.
Mr. Smith says, objection, Your Honor. Relevance 403, 401. If it goes to plan, it's cumulative.
Judge says, what's the relevance? Mr. Berger says, it's relevant to the timing of solicitation, Your Honor, and smooth move. I can direct you to the paragraph. Judge says, all right. Mr. Berger says, first, to set the stage is the very first paragraph on page 1, and then the second is on page 2. The end of that first email starts with the word, quote, now, end quote. The court says, all right.
Mr.
Mr.
Gaylord says also goes to, he's talking about timing. He can refresh his recollection as to opposed to offering it into evidence. In addition to that, who and when a Young Living distributor might be solicited. I mean, that doesn't address it in this email.
Sorry, I lost my place.
20.
Sorry, where are we?
20.
20. Okay, sorry. Mr. Berger, Your Honor, we'd say it's a properly authenticated exhibit that's relevant to the timing.
Mr. Smith says 403.
Okay. The judge, I'll allow it. It's received. And Mr. Berger said, received? The court said, yes. Mr. Berger. Mr. James, I'd like to look at the portion of this mail exchange from Mr. Sterling to you dated January 27th, 2008. Do you see that first paragraph there?
Yeah.
It says, quote, I always loved getting your epistles. People who get as excited, end quote, excuse me, people who, quote, people who get as excited as you about learning, experience, and obtaining blessings are few and far between. I too love that we can share our thoughts and learn, which I do from every communication, end quote. And then could you please turn to the very last paragraph of that same email? So on page 2, Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith says, sorry, what page 2 you said?
Mr. Berger, oops. Sorry. Page 2, yes. Do you see that there on your monitor?
Yes.
In the paragraph that states, or that starts, now here's the question from Mr. Sterling. Oh, and the paragraph that starts, quote, now here's the question, end quote, from Mr. Sterling, quote, is it possible for you to come up north for some meetings this Tuesday? I realize you're actually employed, unlike some of us, and have to please an employer. We would like to discuss some serious strategies about an EDR and your smooth move, as well as a number of other things. Quote, if Tuesday doesn't work, we can come up with another day. There's so much to do. I've been busy the last couple of weeks taking care of some issues and getting some important structures in place. It is now time to start executing our plan in earnest. If we can think we are going to hit an April pre-launch date, end quote. Do you remember, did doTERRA have a pre-launch target of April 2008?
Yeah, epistles was a weird way to say that.
Yes.
I wouldn't remember when it was, but I don't remember.
Okay, I need to take a quick congestion break. 1 second. If you want to look at the chat real quick, I'm gonna mute myself. Hold on. Sorry. Ugh, I know, gross.
I didn't need a congestion break. I needed an eye break. Seeing all of the letters and the lines just kind of blurs into one another. And I already don't have the best eyes. That's why you might see me looking up to make sure that I stay on the correct line.
No, it's tough. Live chat. I don't even know.
Is the congestion getting worse, or is it getting better from when you were sick?
It's getting better. I think it's just I'm still coughing at night, so I think I think I'm getting better for sure. I think it's just like
we've been doing a lot of reading.
I don't know what it is when I'm congested and I read, my nose is like, oh, we're gonna be extra congested, and it's like, no.
Yeah. It's like, this is our opportunity.
Yes. Okay, do you remember when approximately it would have been shortly after you received this email? Is that right?
Yeah, shortly after.
Sometime maybe at the end of January or beginning of February 2008?
Correct.
Do you remember going up to meet at doTERRA's offices with Mr. Sterling and Emily Wright and Greg Cook?
Vaguely. I remember Greg Cook and Sterling. I'm not sure whether Emily was there. I just can't recall.
Okay. She may have been, she may not have been. Is that correct?
Yes.
Could you turn to Exhibit 35? Are you there?
Yeah, you have been doing a lot of
I know. I'm so
talking.
sorry to everybody. I'm just like, no one's ever going to be able to watch anything because, like, we're just hanging out live.
Yes.
Okay, and there's a brief email at the very top, but I'd like you to skip over that and just look at the rest of Exhibit 35.
Okay.
I'll ask you, is that an email that you sent to David Sterling on February 7th, 2008?
It appears to be.
Your Honor, I move the admission of 35.
Finally, Mr. Gaylord, no objection.
Finally, for the love of God. Finally. Okay, Mr. Berger, Susan. So, Mr. James, I'd like to direct your attention to, yes, the beginning of the email that you wrote to David Sterling on February 7th, 2008. Susan, if you can go up to the top, see the first paragraph? An email that you wrote to Mr. Sterling dated February 7th, 2008, and you write, quote, David, I wanted to write you about Thomas, end quote. That's Thomas Oldroyd, correct?
Yes.
He was a Young Living distributor at the time, correct?
Yes.
And if you skip down a few paragraphs, Susan, to the word, quote, Gina, end quote, you write, quote, Gina, his wife, end quote. So Thomas Oldroyd is married at least at the time to Gina Truman. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Do you want to switch?
Yes, I do. Hold on.
Okay.
Let me blow my nose again. I'm sorry. I'm so gross.
You're good.
Live chat, ask some questions, distract the stream. Let me just
do what you got to do.
Okay. We're going to take a little cross. Wait. Stream break. Okay.
Oh,
sorry. I'm like so gross. I'm like grossing myself out.
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
All right. You're Mr. Berger now, correct?
Nose.
Yep. Okay. Add this back.
Okay. So, it actually starts with okay. All right, 18. Okay, so quote, so Gina, his wife, is fully aware now of doTERRA and is, to say the least, very, very excited about the new opportunities. She has a very good understanding of the oils she taught Wendy, end quote. Wendy is your wife, right?
Yes.
She taught, quote, she taught Wendy everything she knows and has been to our home many times to do raindrop on our kids. She is super close, especially to Delmont, end quote. Who is Delmont? Is that Delmont Truman?
Yes.
That's Gina's father?
Yes.
All right. And he's a Young Living distributor at the time, correct?
Yes.
And who is Delmont's wife?
Carol with a K, I call her.
Carol with a K. I've seen that acronym, KWAK. Is that Carol with a K?
Yeah.
So his wife is Carol, correct?
Yes.
Delmont and Carol are Young Living distributors?
Yes.
And they're the mom and dad of Gina Truman, correct?
Yes.
Quote, so she is super close, especially to Delmont, and we are posturing and preparing the best way to tell them about things. Smooth move. We are, all Wendy, Gina, and I, thinking about some point a visit from you.
Sorry,
next one.
Next page. Okay. Sorry, I'm back. I'm back engaged. I'm in
visit from you or Justin or any team members who will be very helpful in the transition, end quote. Do you recall whether Mr. Sterling ever met with Wendy and you and Gina to discuss doTERRA?
I don't remember that.
Are you saying it didn't happen or you don't recall one way or the other? Sorry, I need to follow up.
I really don't remember. I guess I don't recall.
Then the last paragraph on that page reads, quote, I thought I would try to give Justin a call tonight, end quote. You're referring to Justin Harrison?
Probably yes.
Quote, I think we have met once, but I don't know him. I doubt he knows of me. It will be good to explain my relationship to the Trumans and the Oldroyds, and discuss opportunities. Gina wants to be there for the call, end quote. So you indicated that you were going to try and give Justin a call that night, February 7th, correct?
Correct.
And you did give Justin a call that night?
Sorry, I'm turning Kat up. I know y'all are asking. Apologies. I'm turning Kat up, so hopefully it's easier to hear.
I don't have a background. What's in my background?
I think they wanted to turn her. We wanted you to be turned up in the stream.
Oh,
I don't know.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't hear any noise in the background.
No, you're good. I think I just turned you up, so hopefully people can hear you better.
Okay.
Correct. And then I think we did.
I
think line 25.
25. Okay. Do you remember that Wendy and Gina were on the phone call with you?
Yes, they were listening in. Yes.
Listening in, you say?
Yeah, it was probably on the speakerphone.
All right. And were you and Wendy and Gina at your home?
Yes.
Okay. And you were in the basement of your home?
Yes.
And you called to Justin Harrison?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And during that call, did you discuss the opportunity with doTERRA?
I wish I could remember the call. I don't remember anything about it.
Okay. Let me ask you to turn to page 69 of your deposition, please. Lines 15 through 16 through 19.
69?
Yes, 9. You may recall in your deposition, may I approach, Your Honor?
And the judge says yes, and then Mr. Berger.
Wait, who needs to drink more water? Oh,
I think me.
yeah.
I'm good. I'm have my soda. I need to get some water in a second though. Yeah.
Do you want to stop it or?
Oh no, let me see. Let's see. We're on page 127. Okay, let me look. We're close to the next
Oh,
deal.
a bit of my background, like background of
Oh, like you're like
of who I am.
Oh yeah. Yeah, why don't we let Kat talk about her background real quick? What was I on? 127?
I thought background of I have a 10-month-old,
Yes.
almost 10-month-old, and I didn't know if he was making noise, but I was like, I can't hear him when he's yelling or crying or anything.
Let's let Kat talk for a second. I'm gonna go get some water real quick. I'll be right back.
Sounds good. So I'm a licensed registered dietitian nutritionist, and I primarily make YouTube videos talking about nutrition-related MLMs and other kind of scammy nutrition companies, products, programs. There was a question in one of the MLM or anti-MLM Facebook groups about what is it called? The name just fell out of my head. But it's by the people who created the 75 hard. And so, and somebody had a question about why I wasn't a big fan of the 75 hard. And so that's probably going to be my next video. I was thinking about doing, actually, since I've been doing these lives, I've been having a lot of fun with them. So I might do a live on that. But I just like talking about nutrition related, like diet culture related things, breaking that down, the toxicities of them from my perspective as a registered dietitian.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I primarily work with people who are trying to get away from dieting culture and those kind of rules and restrictions, kind of the arbitrary programs, and have a healthy relationship with food and body. So that's primarily who I work with. Within that, though, athletes, prenatal nutrition, and digestive health, which I have to say digestive health because the term gut health, which a lot of dietitians used to use a long time ago, but it's been kind of co-opted by gurus and a lot of MLMs. So I just say digestive health now.
Yep.
But overall, just building a healthy relationship with food and body. Thank you for asking.
That's awesome. I always love a good backstory. So I'm always like, tell me more. Yeah. Okay. I think we're on line 20. Where are we on? Line 23?
Yeah,
so
we did this. Yeah, may I approach, Your Honor? Yes.
Okay. And then judge says yes, and then Mr. Berger.
Portions of your deposition were determined attorney's eyes only. Those were separately bound and sealed. That's why those pages are blank. I'll give you the attorney's eyes only and ask you to turn to page 69.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Page 69, lines 16 through 19. Could you please read those?
Okay.
Mr. James, does that refresh your recollection as to whether you and Wendy and Gina talked about Justin Harrison on February 7, 2008 about the opportunity with doTERRA?
Doesn't refresh, doesn't help me remember, but yeah, I see here. And then Mr. Gaylord says, objection.
You think you did?
Yeah.
So how long do you think that phone call lasted? Do you recall?
I don't remember. I think I read in my deposition that somebody mentioned it was 30 minutes. I don't remember though.
Okay. Would you disagree that it was 30 minutes?
No.
Okay. And do you recall when Gina Truman signed up as a doTERRA distributor?
The same time we did. I'm not sure when that was.
So mid-February 2008?
Yeah, or the end of February.
At that time, you and Wendy and Justin had the phone call with Gina. She was not a doTERRA distributor. Is that right?
I don't think so.
She signed up sometime after that call, correct?
I think so, yes.
Do you remember any of the particulars about that discussion, like who spoke first, for example, on the call?
I don't.
Do you remember Gina introducing you to Justin on that call?
I don't recall, but I think she did. I think she talked first.
Okay. Do you recall whether Justin talked about his plans for what he was going to do at doTERRA?
No,
You don't remember, or?
I don't remember.
Okay. All right. Do you recall whether he said good things about doTERRA?
I don't recall specifics, but my impression is that he was kind of excited about the prospects of doTERRA.
Okay. And he communicated that during the phone call, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did he talk about the oils, doTERRA's oils?
I don't remember.
You don't remember him talking about the quality of the oils in that conversation?
No.
Do you recall discussing with Justin that he might come down to St. George?
No, I don't remember that.
Not saying it didn't happen, or you just don't remember?
Yeah.
Okay. And do you remember whether Justin Harrison encouraged Gina Truman to join doTERRA on that call?
No, I don't think he did.
But he talked about the opportunity at doTERRA, correct?
Mr. Gaylord,
Objection.
objection. Foundation. Judge overruled. Mr. Gaylord asked and answered as well. Judge overruled. And then Rob
Say it
James.
again.
Mr. Berger. Oh, sorry. I was saying it again.
Yeah,
Sorry,
we
you're
flipped
good.
it. You said
sorry.
say it again.
I know. I was like, I'm back.
But he talked about the doTERRA opportunity, correct? During that call? That was your testimony just a minute ago.
Okay, yes.
So can you turn to Exhibit 36. Do you recognize that as an email exchange between you and David Sterling dated February 8th, 2008?
Yes.
Your Honor, move the admission of 36.
Mr. Gaylord, hearsay, Your Honor. Judge says response.
This was also designated by the defendants, Your Honor.
Okay, the judge says, is there a hearsay exception that you are relying on?
Back to Mr. Berger. Well, we try. Well, why don't we try and refresh his recollection with this?
The court said, all right. Mr. Berger. Oops.
Could you, Mr. James, look at the first email, which would, in chronological order, which would be the last email on page 1. It's an email. Well, do you see that from?
Yes.
From you to Mr. Sterling?
Yes.
And do you see the subject line there?
Yes.
All right. And can you read that first?
Mr. Gaylord says, objection, Your Honor. He has to ask the question first and then see if it refreshes his recollection.
I did ask the question.
The judge said, I think he did, so I'll allow the inquiry. And then Mr. Smith. It's not admitted into evidence. If he's reading it to himself, I have no objection. And the court says he was asked to read it to himself. And then Mr. Gaylord said, sorry, we missed it. And then Mr. Berger.
It's the first 3 sentences there.
Okay.
Have you read that?
No, hang on.
No, take your time.
Okay.
Does that refresh your recollection as to the portion of that was discussed on the phone call? By the way, if I was like reading that, I would be so nervous with everybody just looking at me trying to
Yes.
read a
Yeah.
page, paragraph, multiple pages. Like I can't do math whenever people are watching me.
Yeah, I get really nervous too.
I would just read it and be like, I don't comprehend this. Okay.
Yep. So A, let me make sure I'm reading the right area.
Sure. May I, Your Honor?
The court said yes, go ahead. And then I think that's me here, and then Mr. Berger.
Does that refresh your recollection about a portion of the conversation you had that night?
Again, it doesn't help any recollection, but... And then Mr. Gaylord, objection, Your Honor. He says it doesn't refresh his recollection. I don't want him to go in and make any other answer to that. And the judge says, I think that answers the question. And then Mr. Berger.
Can you turn to page 2 of the exhibit, Mr. James? Do you see the first full sentence there?
Yes.
All right. You testified that you couldn't recall whether Justin Harrison was going to come down to St. George by the end of February. Can you read that? I'll ask you if that refreshes your recollection.
Mr. Gaylord says mischaracterizes his testimony. He already testified that he did come down to St. George. And then the judge said, I'll allow you to explore that on cross. Go ahead. And then Rob James says, okay. And we're back to Mr. Berger.
And did Mr. Harrison come down to St. George in February?
It appears so.
And so after you had that phone call with Justin Harrison, Gina Truman, and your wife, Wendy, did you report to David Sterling?
I think I emailed him that night.
Can you turn to Exhibit 65? Are you there, Mr. James?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recognize this email exchange between you and Mr. Sterling, dated February 13th, 2008?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move the admission of 65.
Mr. Gaylord, objection, Your Honor. Hey, Karina. Yeah, let's take a little chat. A chat hello since we're at the top of the page. Hold on. Okay. Let's see. Chat. What's going on, chat? Okay, you're cleaning, Karina. Good luck. I hate cleaning. Oh man. I think part of it for me is I don't recall, but I think it was. It's not just I don't recall. They seem to be trying at least.
Yeah, more than Gary.
Yeah, way more than Gary.
It's literally like splitting. He's the type of person that makes you so mad where it's like, well, I don't exactly remember, but that's not exactly how I said it when you're only missing like one word. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, come on.
I would see it as more genuine too.
Yep.
And I don't think that's just like our voice inflection or the snark on it. Like it does seem more genuine.
Yeah. And I think like even with us being snarky, I think that this other guy, even because I think this other guy is like Young Living's making their case. They make their case. The plaintiff makes their side first. I think they have obviously they have an opportunity with this witness, and this witness comes across better for Young Living. So
yes, Elizabeth.
Yes.
I don't go often very much. So
yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Some of these messages are on Kat's page. If you don't already follow Kat, she's a way bigger account. She's even being nice, just streaming with me. She has like almost 5,000 people following her, which is incredible.
But how many add more? I don't live stream. So my followers are like, what is she doing?
I know. Yes. If you are discovering me and you're on Kat's page, I'm going to apologize for any technical difficulties. We're looking into Young Living. So it's been super fun so far. Love for you to go like Kat's page if you don't already do that, and like her stream. That would be great. And like my stream. I'd love a pity like. So okay.
You're doing
okay. Where Mr. Gaylord objected, correct. Your Honor, hearsay bottom portion, and then Mr. Berger.
Mr. Berger says, Your Honor, they did not make that objection in their pretrial disclosures.
The court said, is there a waiver? I don't have the pretrial disclosures right in front of me. I don't know which binder it's in.
Would you like to see it, Your Honor?
Judge says yes. Then Mr. Gaylord says that's always an objection. Hearsay is always an objection we can raise. We've got to see how it's coming in and what is being presented. So the hearsay objection stands. All represent to the court we did not raise an 801, 802, or 803 objection. We still raise the objection now.
Back to Mr. Berger, says, Your Honor, that's a substantive objection. An objection that we had made at the time that the parties made their disclosures and the parties had planned around. That objection is more pertinent. So we will move the admission of Exhibit 65.
The court said, I'll receive it. And then Mr. Smith says, excuse me, we object in our 401, 402, 403. The court did not rule this could be admitted under 402 previously, and under 401 and 403, we think it's irrelevant. If irrelevant under 403, it should be excluded. And then the judge said, which portion did you want me to look at? And then Mr. Berger.
All right. On this one, Your Honor, it's the top email, the second, third, and fourth paragraphs, and then the email at the bottom, first two paragraphs. Couple on page 2, I can direct you to when you're there, particularly in the middle of the second paragraph on the first page and then in the following 2 paragraphs.
The court said, I'll allow it, I'll receive it.
All right, back to Mr. Berger. Susan, could you go to the bottom of page 1, please? Could you blow up the email up from Mr. James to Mr. Sterling, the one at the bottom? Thank you. On February 13, 2008, you wrote to David Sterling and you start out by saying, quote, I don't want to bother you too long with this, but Wendy, end quote, your wife, quote, is going out of her mind bugging me about this until I promised I would ask, end quote. Then you ask him in the next paragraph, you ask him for Justin's email. Do you recall whether Sterling ever gave you Justin Harrison's email address?
No.
And you say, quote, I guess I should just call him, but I don't know if he was away from Young Living for sure yet. I heard rumors that he left early yesterday instead of Wednesday, end quote. Do you have an understanding at the time of the phone call that you placed to Mr. Harrison that we just talked about with you and Wendy and Gina? Was Mr. Harrison still an employee of Young Living at that time?
I don't know.
Okay, turn to page 2 and Exhibit 65. And the third paragraph, Susan, you're talking here about your wife's questions. Quote, but if that's the first question she has, which I'm sure I would need to forward to Justin, when can we start meeting and when can we get to indoctrinate them? I told her that Justin would probably be one, end quote.
What?
So you're thinking about Justin. What do you mean by, quote, indoctrinate, end quote? Are you talking about recruiting?
I'm not sure. I would think that I'm not sure.
You don't recall what you meant there?
No.
Okay. And then your second question, just below that, says, quote, the other question, end quote. I said your question, Wendy's question, but, quote, the other question she had was, do we simply keep track of the downline organization ourselves until they go live? Or are there any other forms of paperwork that they need to fill out now from doTERRA to hold their spots, end quote. So let's look at Mr. Sterling's response to your email. Susan, if we can go to the top of the email, second paragraph, this is Mr. Sterling's response to you, Mr. James. He says, quote, I'm told there is, end quote, sorry. I'll start up from the beginning of the paragraph, actually. Quote, we've been super busy the last couple of days, but we are making some good progress. The compensation plan is nearing completion. Justin has been providing input for the last couple of days. Young Living's employees, as well as the field, are pretty stunned with Justin leaving. Needless to say, his phone never quits ringing. I don't have his email address yet, but I know you have his number. He told me he tried to return your calls a couple of times, so hopefully you've connected. He is very excited to get with you guys. I'm told there is a meeting already planned for St. George around the end of the month. This will be the first meeting where Justin and possibly Dr. Hill will be together outside of Young Living. It will send tremors for sure. I hear this is happening in Gina's house. Hope she has enough room. End quote. So, do you remember a meeting at Gina's house on February 13th of 2008 about doTERRA?
I think it was later, but I kind of remember it. Finally.
Okay. And what do you remember about that meeting?
I remember Justin talking about lavender and peppermint being good for allergies.
That's so random.
Oh, not compliant. Okay.
Was he talking about doTERRA's lemon and peppermint oils and lavender?
Yeah, and I don't remember much else.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. Do you remember when that meeting was? Was it in February?
I can't be sure. I think the end of February
Okay. Do you remember where it was?
at Gina's house.
Okay. And do you remember who was there? You testified that Justin was there talking about the oils, correct?
Justin, yeah.
Okay. And you were there?
Yes.
Okay. And Wendy?
Yes.
All right. And it was at Gina's house. I presume you can correct me that Gina was there?
I believe so.
Okay. Do you remember whether Thomas Oldroyd was there?
I don't remember.
Was Boyd Truman there?
I don't remember.
What about Sandy Truman?
I don't remember.
Do you remember whether David Sterling was at that meeting?
No, he wasn't.
You're saying he was not, or that you don't remember?
No, he wasn't.
Okay. Was Emily Wright at that meeting?
No.
Okay. Let's go back to Exhibit 65. Oh, wait. Yeah. I was talking about the indoctrinate things. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I spent a little bit more time on that indoctrinate piece.
Yeah. I do too. That's just a weird word to use. Like,
Right.
I mean, it makes sense, but it's just like, okay, all right, we're
Yeah.
just saying it out loud. Got it.
Like,
Oh
what
my
would be
gosh.
the in an email that they're sending to people talking about other people, just to use the term indoctrinate? I don't know. Like,
Yeah. I mean, like, what's the here? What's the regular definition? Because we look at when we're looking at cult stuff all the time. Oops, here we go. Google.
unless like they were joking about it, but that's just something odd to joke if they're actually in an MLM. Like, if
Yeah. Because it means to teach a person or a group to accept a set of beliefs uncritically. To teach
Yeah.
or instruct someone, that's the archaic version, the archaic definition. And underneath, similar to brainwash, propagandize, proselytize, inculcate, re-educate, persuade. So yeah.
And because like sometimes we'll kind of make fun, or not make fun, but just kind of joke about the fact that there's a Elamir distributor who, before she was an Elamir distributor, called Mambi or Kira cult leader. And so we'll make jokes about that being in Mambi's cult. But it's a joke. And they asked him what he meant by indoctrinate. And so if it was something that was like a joke, if somebody said that they were doing that before, you would think that he would respond like that, because I don't know, I would say that it's a joke.
Yeah. Y'all were joking. Yep.
Yeah.
But apparently they weren't. They were like they like doubled down. Not a blink. Not a blink on that one. Holy cow. So am I affirmative, line 17?
Yes.
Okay.
Wait.
Or no? What line am I supposed to be on?
We'll go back to the first email, Susan, on page 1. The third paragraph says to answer. Okay. So, quote, to answer some of Wendy's questions, end quote, I'll skip a little bit until we get to, quote, while we don't have an online sign up for another month or so, we'll be able to enter the information in a structural database from the DAs, end quote. Do you take that to mean distributor agreements?
Affirmative.
Quote, we'll be able to enter the information in a structural database from the DAs, which you can either fax us or email copies. When we have actual kits and products to ship, we will then process the order part of the DA. That is a plan thus far. I'm hoping we'll be able to do this by the end of the month, end quote. Sounds like a pyramid scheme. So do you recall at that time, were you recruiting distributors to doTERRA? This is the end of February 2008. This was actually mid-February 2008.
I believe we were talking to some people, yes.
Okay, and your wife, we read the email from her wondering what do you do with these distributors? How do you keep track of them, correct?
All correct.
All right. And so to keep track of them, what doTERRA wasn't putting them in their computer system at the time, correct?
Correct.
How were you keeping track of them?
There wasn't a lot of them. I just think we knew of who they were.
Okay. Did you communicate those to anyone at doTERRA?
I don't believe so.
Okay, let's go to Exhibit 39. Mr. James, do you recognize that as an email exchange between you and Mr. Sterling dated February 23rd, 2008 and February 22nd, 2008?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move Exhibit 39.
Objection, Your Honor, 401 through 403, as well as hearsay. We did not make a hearsay objection in our disclosures. The judge said that you did or did not. And then Mr. Gaylord said, did not, Your Honor. Want the court to understand.
How are we doing?
Wait, okay. What? We're on page 143, right? Wait,
Yeah.
where? We may need to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not. Okay, 143. You know what? This is a good stopping point. Let's wait, 143. Let's go, since we're at the top of the page, right?
Yes.
Let's do 143. I'm going to take a screenshot, live chat, keep us honest. I will, let's see. We're at 2 hours and 11 minutes. It's a very good stopping point. And again, Kira made a great point. You know, this is Young Living v. doTERRA, but we're not like making Young Living the villain and doTERRA like the savior. We're not fans of multi-level marketing. This case is looking at breach of contract, and we know that doTERRA wins this lawsuit. They successfully defend themselves against Young Living, but I think doTERRA might just be a little less culty than Young Living. From what I understand, doTERRA wasn't moonlighting as a doctor, but they all worked for Young Living or they were distributors at Young Living, and they, you know, it's hit or miss. It's so, you know, it's easy to, I think the tendency for some people to say, oh, they're the bad guy, this guy must be the good guy. That's a simplistic thing that doesn't really play out correctly when we're looking at groups of people. So, yeah.
Yeah. There's with Gary though, I do have a special like
yes, we all do.
Frustration.
Yep. Cool. Well, we're gonna be streaming again, I think, on Saturday. Is that
that works?
So we're gonna be not finishing this stuff. This is a long transcript, but we're still going through, and I think we're gonna try to make little spark notes of like catch up for transcripts that are like 5 minutes. So if you missed out and you're not a fan of long form content like Kat and I are, you can, you know, catch up and then get ready for the next stream. So I'm going to work on that. And yeah, I appreciate live chat hanging out with us. If anyone is interested in manning the behind the scenes and being able to put the comments up so we can read, and I would love for you to reach out to me on Instagram or in my Discord, because I think it just for viewing, some people only have their phones to view on. If we could just have all the comments come up, that would be great. Oh, DeeCee, sleep. I will. I'm drinking water. I'm mostly being healthy. So if you're interested in doing that, I can right now I can afford like doing this sometimes, so I could pay you like $25 for 2 hours. I know that's not a lot, but that's what I can afford right now. And because moderators are doing this work is work, and it's not fun to not be able to enjoy the live chat. So if anyone's interested, please send me a Instagram DM, and it would be for Saturday. And Kat and I are going to figure out the time. So one person, if you're interested, let me know. That would be great. We're going to go ahead and roll the intro. Please stay safe. Please do not ingest essential oils. Kat, do not make Kat cry. Do not make Kat cry. And please don't join an MLM. And we'll be back next time to read page 143 of this transcript. Y'all have been wonderful, incredible, and we always look forward to live streaming with you. So I'm gonna go ahead and roll the outro if I can get to the right page, which I'm right here. Okay. Goodbye, everyone.